So a few months ago I made a video about the situation currently occurring at Gateshead FC, and now since that video it's gone even more crazy than it was at the time. To describe it as turbulent would be a bit of an understatement. They've been through about 10 seasons in one in the last season, so we're going to look into what's happened since that last video in this video. Before we start, this video is sponsored by OneFootball, which is a great way to stay up to date with all the football news across the off-season, into pre-season, and obviously through the season itself. It's a great mobile app with an average rating of 4.7 out of 5 on Google Play. If you haven't downloaded it yet, the link to download it will be in the top line of the description. But without any further ado, let's get straight into the situation at Gateshead. So the previous video that I just mentioned was on the 18th of March, and basically all the problems at the club relate to their chief financial advisor, Joseph Keller. Well, he's technically classed as the financial advisor, but in reality he runs the club. Also, the problem originates through Ranjan Vargas, who is the owner of the club. He actually sold the club a few days ago, but now he's back in charge. I don't even know what's going on at this point. It's impossible to keep up to date, but we're going to delve into all of the problems right now. So we'll start off on the 2nd of April, where the players and management basically went to the owner, Ranjan Vargas, and said, please sell the club. At this point, the players were being paid late, and the club had actually been evicted from the Gateshead International Stadium. Also, there was a bid from Chris Dunphy, the former owner of Rochdale. There were debts in the region around about £200,000 at the club, and Chris Dunphy had offered to purchase the club, but this just wasn't going through. It just seemed to drag on and on and on. And this is where the players basically went to the owner and said, please just accept this offer, get it sold, and then the club can go and progress after that. And despite all this, the club was still under a transfer embargo, which it had been under for about 6 months. They were still fighting up to get into the playoffs, which, just given all the circumstances, is absolutely phenomenal. So for quite a while, Vargas and Keller had basically been saying that they were waiting for the National League to return a bond of £200,000 to them, and after that point they would then leave. It was around about this point that the players' management released a statement where they basically said how unprofessional the things were that were going on at the club, and also that on the 29th of March, and just before an important game that they had against Braintree, they were in training and they were told to basically move all of their things from the Gateshead International Stadium. They had to just stop their training session and leave the stadium because they've been evicted. This was due to the terrible financial mismanagement at the club, which meant that they hadn't actually paid their rent to Gateshead Council. But they continued their statement. They referred to the owners and said, we have the football club at our hearts and nobody wants you at Gateshead any longer. The players, staff, fans, National League and Football Association have all made that abundantly clear. It's in everyone's best interest, including your own, to leave. Having agreed to sell the club to Chris, we simply ask you to honour this promise and leave the club with at least some dignity by allowing Chris to take over alongside Bill Goodwin. On the 7th of April, just prior to kick-off against Ebbsfleet, the club's fans, around about 100 of them, decided that they were going to protest outside the stadium against the current regime. Joseph Keller was actually advised not to attend this game, basically not to infuriate the fans even further. And this all came one day after the players were finally paid their wages. They were paid 7 days late, and some of them were paid improperly. Now fast forward a bit to the end of April, and more specifically to the 29th of April. The season is now finished. The club have finished just outside of the playoffs, which is a phenomenal achievement. But pretty much everyone is being thrown out. The assistant manager Ian Watson had been dismissed, as had the general manager Alicia Henry. All the players except for JJ O'Donnell and Scott Barrow had left the club following the expiry of their contracts. O'Donnell's playing contract to finish, but he was still contracted as the kit man. One day later, on the 30th of April, the manager Ben Clark was apparently dismissed via email after 9 years of service at the club, which is a terrible way to sack someone that length of service. Well, anyone in general, to sack them via email is pretty bad. But for someone who's been at the club for so long and done so well with them, stepping in as manager halfway through the season and delivered a finish inside the top half of the table with those circumstances, it is terrible to see. Also, their press officer Dominic Skur was also sacked. He was sacked by email, which meant that this full-time National League club was now down to just 2 full-time employees. The club's fans then reclaimed the club's Twitter account, so the club now actually didn't have an official Twitter platform. On the 2nd of May, the fans group Gateshead Soul announced they were going to create a breakaway Phoenix club. It'll be a fan-owned club and it will cost just £10 per person to become part of the ownership. Although the club didn't even have a name at this point, Gateshead Soul announced that they would actually have a management team in place. They knew who they were going to get as their management team, and that the club would play within the borough of Gateshead. Now, this is because there were worries that with the club being kicked out of the Gateshead International Stadium, they'd had to move away and move out of Gateshead. Most likely, this club would actually have to start in the Wearside League, which is step 7 of the non-league pyramid. So they have to drop a long way down to from step 1 to step 7. And by this point, every single member of paid staff at the club had been dismissed. Everyone's gone. Everyone's left. This club literally has no staff. It is literally just being run by Vargas and Calla. The takeover for Chris Dunphy still had not happened. This was just dragging on. On the 15th of May, the club survived a winding up order that was placed for them due to unpaid tax to HMRC, but the club did manage actually to pay this day in time, and they survived. But at this point, wages hadn't even been paid to their now former staff and players. Their wages for April had not been paid, and we're halfway through May at this point. On the 16th of May, the club actually appointed a new manager. That was their former reserves manager, Dave Dixon, so he comes in to replace Ben Clark. Fast forward another couple of days, and on the 18th of May, it was basically announced that the 22nd of May would be D-Day for the club. This could be the day that the club goes under. They needed a miracle basically to survive. They reportedly needed £95,000 paid by that point to survive, and this would ensure that the National League would release £100,000 of that bond that I mentioned earlier. It finally looked like Dunphy was actually going to go and be the new owner. The former Rochdale owner had an offer accepted of £1, but then this was raised by Calla to £100,000, which Dunphy was like, no, this is ridiculous. So he left, and he's now no longer interested in buying Gateshead. At this point, it was announced that Gateshead Council were owed a substantial 5-figure sum in rent from Gateshead, and they wanted proof of funds to basically allow the club to continue playing at the Gateshead International Stadium going forward. Fast forward to the 22nd of May, this is just before the club could potentially go under, and it looked like they'd actually been saved right at the 11th hour. A 4.5-hour meeting took place between some former staff, the owner, Vargas, Calla, and a fan called Neil Pinkerton. This guy lives down in Devon, and he wanted to purchase the club. So he decided to transfer £25,000 in funds after his offer was eventually accepted. So he would actually become the new owner, and his name was actually added on Company's House, basically saying that he is now part of this club. Vargas resigned on Company's House. This was all announced just 1 hour before Vargas was due to go into a meeting on the 23rd of May with the FA at Wembley regarding the club's future. On to the 24th of May, and it was announced that Gateshead were going to be suspended from the National League. They were not going to be allowed to carry on in the National League next season. This suspension happened due to multiple breaches of the league regulations. As part of this, they were actually deducted 9 points from their overall points total from the previous season, the 18-19 season. I don't really see the point in this, to be honest, because the season's gone. They didn't finish into the playoffs or anything like that. So deducting 9 points is no real major thing in my opinion, but they were fined £3,500, which does seem like a relatively low amount, but for a club in so much debt, that is still substantial. What this would mean would be potentially Aldershot, which finished in the 4th bottom place in the relegation zone. They will be reprieved to stay in the National League. However, this hasn't actually been announced it's going to happen yet, because Gateshead actually do have the right to appeal this suspension if they can prove that they have new owners who satisfy the National League's ground grading and financial criteria for next season, and that will basically see them stay in the National League. However, if this didn't happen, then the club would have to enter negotiations to take part in a different league. Now, with them being suspended from the National League, it would be very, very, very unlikely that they'll be allowed into the National League North, because it's obviously part of the same league structure, and the regulations and stuff that they've breached will basically be the same for the National League and the National League North, most likely. And with also the 7th and 8th tier as well, they'll be going into the Evo Stick Northern Premier League Premier Division, most likely if they're going in the 7th tier, and the regulations, I'd imagine, for those leagues will be similar as well. Also very strict. So will they be allowed into those leagues? So it's a case of how far down the pyramid do they have to drop before there is going to be a league or a league system that actually lets them take part. And to throw in even more confusion, Neil Pinkerton was actually removed from Company's House, and Vargas was put back on as a director at Gateshead just 24 hours after it was announced that Pinkerton had purchased the club. Apparently the funds had been returned to Pinkerton, and basically we're back to square one again. It's the same structure that was running the club before. However, reportedly Vargas actually quickly returned to Hong Kong despite all these problems going on, so who knows what's going on. On the 27th of May, Calla announced that there was a rival bidder to Pinkerton and the club was actually now going to be sold to this rival bidder. He remained unnamed. Calla released a statement saying that we only want what is best for the club, not us. However, we were ready to meet with HMRC on Tuesday and close the club down because everyone has been so nasty to us. The club now won't be liquidated because someone has come on board at the 11th hour. I think that's an incredible thing to say that it's all about the club, not about us, and then say that we're ready to wind the club up because everyone's been nasty to us in the next paragraph. I think that is an absolutely unbelievable thing to say in a statement as someone that's essentially running a football club, because he really should not be running this football club because he is his chief financial advisor and he can't be a director because of his previous history of basically failing the directors and owners test. So he's in as a chief financial advisor, which basically gets around that problem, but he still effectively runs the club without being allowed to. Apparently this rival bidder is a local businessman from Tyneside, so we'll see what happens with regards to this businessman and whether it actually goes through, whether it's going to end up saving the club, whether they stay in the National League. We will see about what is going to happen in the upcoming weeks and months. I feel so bad for their fans because it's been such turmoil over the last season. They started off so promising really with a good squad assembled, also going through the season playing some really good football and doing well in the National League. On the pitch everything looks great, but off the pitch it is the total opposite, and I feel really bad for them as a fan base. The final part of Calla's statement says that we have cleared the debt and left the club virtually debt free. It is in a position where it can prosper for years to come. Right, and so this situation has now taken another twist. The rest of this video was filmed on the 29th of May. Today is the 31st of May. And yeah, in the last 24 hours, there's been even more things going on. As of right now, the takeover of Gateshead from Ranjan Vargas to a fan-owned consortium is pretty much finished. Neil Pinkerton, as I mentioned earlier in the video, as well as Trevor Clark, another Gateshead fan, they are leading a consortium of Gateshead fans that are purchasing the club. A deal has been agreed and the legal paperwork has been exchanged, and it looks like hopefully everything is going to be sorted. Now they have released a statement saying that a consortium headed by Neil Pinkerton and Trevor Clark have undertaken and completed the necessary legal paperwork to purchase the club from Dr. Ranjan Vargas. Rest assured that all deadlines the National League and FA will be met to ensure compliance and to hopefully overturn the sanctions which were rightly imposed on the club. It is imperative that we safeguard our 10-year affinity at the top of the non-league pyramid for at least the 19-20 season. We appreciate there will be many questions and not necessarily an abundance of answers in the coming days. However, rest assured that fellow fans have every right to be as excited as we are as we head into a new era with not only a club that we can call our own, but one that has the stability and integrity that it has been missing. We look forward to drawing a line under the past and hope to have some exciting announcements in the coming days. So by the time that this video is actually uploaded, more things may have happened. These exciting announcements, these may have happened as well. So who knows what is actually going to have happened by the time that you guys see this video. But regardless, it seems like it's a lot more positive now than it certainly was even just a few days prior to when this video is being recorded. So yeah, what do you guys think of this situation? Do you think Gateshead are now actually going to go and prosper and hopefully stay in the National League? Because as they have said in that statement, they're going to try and do their best that they can to submit all of the paperwork that they can and everything that needs to be submitted to the National League as part of the appeal against their suspension from their National League licence. And this will basically mean that if they're successful, then they'll be able to stay in the National League. And they did say previously that all they needed to do was provide reassurances on their finances and their ground and grading. So that was what needs to be done, and if they can do that, they'll stay in the National League. So what do you guys think of this situation? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button and click subscribe as well. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.